Before I start this scenario, this is a part 2 for my What If Al Gore Won the 2000 election, where we have an incumbent Al Gore versus John McCain in the 2004 election. So if you haven't seen that video, I recommend going back and watching it before this one. Shameless self-promotion is now over. With that, let's get into the scenario. Both candidates could easily win in a landslide election in 2004. Al Gore is the incumbent who led America through 9/11 and the War on Terror while trying to pay back the deficit at home and be a third-wave Democrat who supports green environmental politics. McCain, meanwhile, had been a POW in the Vietnam War and would be strongly hawkish on the War on Terror, which would fit the mainstream policies against terrorism, compared to Gore's relatively restrained take. McCain also supported sustainable energy but would not want to pass any legislature that cuts jobs, providing him a middle ground between Al Gore and Bush Republicans. Assuming that there has not been an Iraq war yet, Lieberman would still advocate for the invasion during the 2004 election. Gore might switch running mates or keep Lieberman for unity purposes. If Lieberman is exchanged for Kerry, then Lieberman might switch parties and endorse John McCain, who might choose him as a running mate, but it's more likely that McCain will choose the great Jeb Bush. I also feel like Gore would keep Lieberman anyway, so yeah. If Lieberman stays on the Democrat ticket with Gore for 2004, which is more likely, then Gore might try to shift Lieberman's hawkish policies towards Afghanistan to get away from a potential Iraq war. This would include increased airstrikes in Afghanistan and probably more ground troops combined with increased sanctions on Iraq and cruise missile strikes against Saddam if he continues to not comply with UN inspections. Regardless, the McCain campaign could still easily attack the disunity between the two on foreign policy. In any event, McCain might win the 2004 election because of serious Democrat disunity between Lieberman being more hawkish on Afghanistan and the war on terrorism, and Gore being a bit more dovish. 2008 would be unknown for McCain, assuming that he won in 2004. It would really depend on if the economy crashes before the election or just after due to a lack of the Bush tax cuts. In his term, McCain increases troops in Afghanistan and launches the Iraq War around 2006 if Saddam believes that he can play the same game with McCain as he had with Gore about non-compliance to threaten Iran while complying with the UN after a US strike. The housing market crashes in 2008, but it might be after November. Infrastructure bills that had been under Gore would continue to pass under McCain. There would be more environmentally friendly, but without US jobs being sacrificed in legislature, and he would pass election reforms. You see, McCain was considered the anti-establishment candidate during his time in the Senate due to his maverick voting record and his campaign reforms platform to keep PACs and corporate funding out of politics. He would also gain the benefits of being president in the 2004 to 2008 and potentially until 2012 era. So, all those glorious nostalgic games, shows, and toys are under the McCain administration. McCain's administration would likely include Chuck Hagel as Secretary of State, Colin Powell as Secretary of Defense, Condoleezza Rice as National Security Advisor, Tom Ridge as Secretary of Homeland Security, and Jeb would probably want W to have a position in the administration as well. Assuming the market crashes after the November election, McCain wins in 2008 against former Democrat Secretary of State and former possible running mate John Kerry. During McCain's second term, the U.S. supports the Arab Spring. The Iraq War is run differently than it was in our timeline, but it is still very polarizing. Catches bin Laden during Operation Neptune Spear in 2011, and in 2012, Obama is elected against VP Jeb Bush, and in 2016, Obama wins against Trump or Ron Paul. Neoconservatism is more mainstream in the Republican Party since it won an election 4 years more recent, and Iraq War was started under different circumstances and was better run. But due to the economic crash in McCain's second term, the party's neocon ideology has a negative taste to the voters domestically. However, if the economy collapses during McCain's first term, then it's more likely that Kerry and Obama can defeat him in 2008, followed by another term against Romney. But there's a 2016 Republican win against Obama. That Republican could be Jeb, who is the popular governor of Florida and McCain's former vice president, or George W. Bush, as he planned on running again if he lost in 2000. For a Gore victory, he could still win with or without Lieberman, regardless of any Iraq War gaffes as vice president or being exchanged for Secretary of State Kerry. Clark would then replace Kerry as Secretary of State, and Gore might offer Lieberman Clark's former position as National Security Advisor if he were to be exchanged, but again, I really don't think he would have been exchanged. When the McCain campaign advocates for hawkish policies, Gore could refer to his Vietnam War service to not escalate the war on terror or invading Iraq. He could also double down on this position if he had Kerry as his VP. Gore is a wartime president in a just war against terrorism and the Taliban, and currently the economy is going well. He would be popular among moderates and independents as he had led America through 9/11 despite the partisan attacks within the government. However, the McCain attacks label him as doing a lack of action against terrorism by the Gore administration, which Gore could respond with some increased actions in Afghanistan and increasing and advising cooperation among other governments against terrorist groups within those other countries. Without Cheney's PACs, SBVT gets no traction, especially since McCain had criticized the allegations by the group during the Bush administration in our timeline. In 2008, the Democratic primaries include Secretary of State or Vice President Kerry, Vice President or National Security Advisor Lieberman if he hadn't been dropped from the ticket, Senator Obama, Senator Hillary Clinton, and National Security Advisor / Secretary of State former General Wesley Clark. The 2008 Republican primaries include 2004 running mate Jeb hawkish maverick Lindsey Grant, liberal Republican Mitt Romney, isolationist Ron Paul, and Mayor Rudy Giuliani. With the economic collapse, Obama, Hillary, Paul, and Jeb all gained support within their primaries. Maybe W even comes back. Neoconservatism hasn't been stained by the idiotic planning and conduct of the Iraq War and focuses on criticizing Gore's perceived dovish policies. If the economy crashes after the 2008 election, then Kerry and Obama might barely be able to defeat the Republican in 2008, but 2012 would give a solid Republican victory to W. Bush or Romney. If the economy did crash before the election, though, Jeb wins in 2008 and then 2012 against Hillary. Both Gore and McCain would likely be well perceived no matter who won in 2004, and the 2004 election would be seen as less polarizing, especially compared to our 2004 election, and the alternate political climate in the 2000s would be very different. Both could gain a landslide victory if they play their cards right, but could also make the election very close and competitive. If you want my best prediction on this alternate 2004 election, I feel like Gore Lieberman would still win the election since he had led the U.S. through 9/11 and was currently leading the war in Afghanistan against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But it would be a very close election since he's running against John McCain, who would more so appeal to war on terror hawks, which puts him well in the mainstream of the early 2000s. After Al Gore's 2 terms, the 2008 election would go to Bush and possibly Tom Ridge as vice president, as I think the Bush tax cuts had little to do with the housing market crashing when it did. Bush is re-elected in 2012 against Obama, and 2016 would be completely unknown. So basically, with this scenario, Bush is back. What do you think would have happened had the 2004 election been between an incumbent Gore and McCain? What do you think the results and effects would have been? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.